My Dream of Heaven, Chapter 8. Not as a child shall we again behold her, for when with rapture wild in our embraces we again enfold her, she will not be a child, but a fair maiden in her Father's mansion, clothed with celestial grace, and beautiful with all the soul's expansion, shall we behold her face. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. The next day, my brother being away upon an important mission, I started out alone to see if I might not find the dear young friends of whom I had caught a fleeting glance the day before. I knew that all things were ordered all right in that happy world, and that sooner or later I should find them again, yet I could but hope it might be very soon. I recalled the happy light upon their fresh young faces as they had met the beloved Master, and I longed to talk with them of their life from day to day. From thinking of them, I began again to think of my blessed interview with Him, and became so absorbed in these thoughts that I was even oblivious to the beautiful world around me. Suddenly I heard someone say, "Surely that is Mrs. Sprague," and looking up, I saw sweet Mary Bates a few steps away, regarding me intently. I cried joyfully, "My precious Mamie!" and she flew to me, and folding me in her arms, drew my head to her shoulder in the old caressing way, almost sobbing in her great joy. "Dear, dear little Muzzer," a pet name often used by her in the happy past, how glad I am to have you here. I could scarcely wait to find you." "How did you know I was here, Mamie?" "The Master told me," she said softly. "May had already told me, and we were on the way to find you when we met him, and he told us he had just left you. And then we knew we must wait a little," she said reverently. How my heart thrilled. He had thought about and spoken of me after we parted. I longed to ask her what he had said, but dared not. Seeming to divine my thoughts, she continued, "He spoke so tenderly about you, and said we must be with you much. May had work to do today, and as she had already seen you once, I came alone. She may be here later on. May I stay a long time with you? There is so much to tell you, so much to ask about." "Indeed you may. I had started out to find you when we met. Come, dear child, let us return home at once." And so, clinging to each other, we set out toward my home. "What shall I tell you first?" I asked. "Everything about the dear ones, every individual member of our beloved household. Begin with my precious, heartbroken mother." Here her voice broke a little, but she continued, "I'm with her often, but her great, and I fear unreconciled sorrow, keeps me from being the comfort to her that I long to be. If only she could spend 1 hour with me here, could know God's wisdom and love as we know it, how the cloud would lift from her life, how she would see that the two lives after all are but one." "Yes, dear," I answered. I always urged her to think of it in that light, and to trust implicitly in the Father's tender care and never-failing love. But it's difficult for us to see beyond the lonely hearthstone and the vacant chair. Still, I believe she does begin to dimly grasp the comfort you're so eager to impart. Oh, if only she knew that I need just that to complete my happiness now. We cannot sorrow here as we did on earth, because we've learned to know that the will of the Father is always tender and wise. But even heaven can never be complete for me while I know that my precious mother is forgetful of her many rare blessings simply because I may not be with her in the flesh to share them. There's my father and the boys. Why, I'm as truly hers still as they are. I often sit with them all, with her hand in mine, or my arms around her, my dear little mother. Why must she see me to recognize that? But This is almost complaining, isn't it? Some day she will know all. We must be patient. As we walked on slowly, conversing of the earth life, still in many phases so dear to us, she asking eager questions, I answering as best I could, we saw a group of 4 persons, 3 women and a man, standing under the trees a little to one side of the walk. The man's back was towards us, but we at once recognized the master. The women were all strangers, and one of them seemed to have just arrived. Her hand the Savior held as he talked with her, while all were intently listening to his words. We regarded the group in silence as we slowly passed, not hoping for recognition from him at such a time, but just as we were opposite to them, he turned and looked upon us. He did not speak, but oh, that look, so full of tenderness and encouragement and benediction. It lifted us, it bore us upward, it enthralled and exalted us, and as we passed onward, the clasp of our hands tightened, and rapture unspeakable flooded our hearts. We finished our walk in silence, and sat down on the marble steps in the shadow of the overhanging trees. The dear child nestled close against my side, and laid her head upon my shoulder, while I rested my cheek caressingly upon it. After a time I whispered, half to myself, was there ever such a look? Instantly she raised her head, and looking at me said eagerly, you think so too? I was sure you would. It is always just so. If he is too much engaged to speak to you at the time, he just looks at you, and it is as though he talked a long while with you. Is he not wonderful? Why could we not have known him on earth as we know him now? How long were you here before you met him? I asked. Oh, that is the wonderful part of it. His was the first face I looked upon after I left the body. I felt bewildered when I first realized that I was free, and I stood for a moment irresolute, and then I saw him standing just beside me with that same look upon his face. At first I felt timid and half afraid, and then he stretched forth his hand to me and said gently, my child, I've come to take care of you. Trust me. Don't be afraid. And then I knew him, and instantly all fear left me, and I clung to him as I would have done to either of my brothers. He didn't say much to me, but somehow I felt that he understood all my thoughts. After a moment I asked, may I not remain a while with Mamma? She is heartbroken. Yes, dear child, as long as you desire, he answered compassionately. Will you also remain? I asked, for I already felt I could not bear to have him leave me. He looked very much pleased, as though he divined my thought, as he answered, yes, I will never leave you, until you are ready to accompany me. Then I went to Mamma, and I put my arms around her, and presently the master too came and whispered words of comfort to her. But I'm not sure she recognized our presence, and though I fancied she grew more calm beneath my caresses, we stayed until all was over. I never left Mamma an instant, except that twice I stole into poor little Hal's sick room when he was for a short time alone. I've always felt that he recognized my presence more than any of them. He lay so still and calm when I talked to him. He seemed to be listening. When they gathered for the last time about my casket, it seemed to me that I must speak. I must show myself to them. Could they for one instant have seen my living self standing so calmly in their midst, they would have turned forever from that lifeless clay they had embalmed and beautified for the tomb. They would have known that I was not there, but they would not recognize the truth. At last I pleaded with the master to let me show myself once to them there, but he said it is not the Father's will. After that I accepted fully the Father's will, And soon thereafter he brought me here in his arms, and what a blessed life it is! I can give only a brief outline of our conversation on that first happy day. It is too sacred to be scanned by curious eyes. We talked until the golden twilight fell, and we watched the little birds nestling in the vines, and heard from afar the solemn, joyous notes of the angels' choral song, and joined our voices in the hymn of praise. Later we went to my room and lay down upon my dainty couch for rest. The last words I heard before sinking into heaven's blissful sleep were tenderly whispered, "Dear, dear little mother, I'm so happy and glad that you are here." More than once the question has been asked, was there night there? Emphatically no. What, for want of a better designation, we may call day, was full of a glorious radiance, a rosy golden light, which was everywhere. There is no language known to mortals that can describe this marvelous glory. It flooded the sky. It was caught up and reflected in the waters. It filled all heaven with joy, and all hearts with song. After a period much longer than our longest earthly day, this glory mellowed and softened until it became a glowing twilight full of peace. The children ceased their playing beneath the trees, the little birds nestled among the vines, and all who had been busy in various ways throughout the day sought rest and quiet. But there was no darkness, no dusky shadows even, only a restful softening of the glory. End of chapter 8.